Hello. Alright, I could probably take my glasses off because there's always a glare when you record. I want to talk to you about suicide. So on January 1st, I was having a great day with my husband, and close to lunchtime, I think, we got a phone call from my husband's mother. She had said there's just been a suicide in the family. Our aunt Heather had taken a bunch of pills and was found by her daughter that next morning. A daughter that she spent every day with for like her whole life. She found her foaming at the mouth, because apparently that's what it looks like when when you're found in that condition. I believe she took a lot of pills. Don't know what kind. Forensics, well, I haven't heard anything from forensics. My husband hasn't said anything to me. She's kind of irrelevant now because she's kind of gone. So, that was our news on the first day of 2019. I didn't have a lot of interactions with her. I've been with my husband for almost 30 years. We don't even live in the same province as they are, so, and I don't really get along with my mother-in-law. She doesn't really like me, so going there is just pointless. It's really not fun for me because she's never treated me like family, really. So I'd rather just stay away than go there. However, I do feel bad for her. This was her closest sibling. She had 4 siblings, including herself. There was 4. And she would talk to Heather every day for most of their adult lives, sometimes 2-3 times a day. What I'm going to give you is the warning signs, because, I don't blame the family that she's gone, that she's dead. She wanted to be dead. That's what she wanted in her eyes. I don't blame them. However, I think that, I believe that there's a way that I can put her soul at rest, because in the last half hour I've had a lot of things go on in my mind, almost like she's talking to me herself and putting these ideas into my head that I can help others. Maybe, she couldn't be helped, but I can help others, and I can tell you what it is that she did and what the warning signs are, and that you need to take them seriously. They all lived in the same area, all of her siblings, and so they would interact with each other, most of them daily, talk to each other daily. About 5 years ago, Heather's let me fix this. Heather's husband had been sick for a lot of years, and I guess they all both thought, you could be prepared for something like that, but I guess no one really is prepared, regardless of what happens to your loved one, or family members, or children. It's just difficult all around, and there's a form of madness that hits us all, I think, when this kind of thing happens, and so you have to know the warning signs, you have to know what to look for, you have to know how to fight when this happens. Okay. Heather was my favorite aunt out of everybody in that side of the family, in my husband's side of the family. She was the only one that ever treated me as family, really. When my children were really small, she went out of her way and got 2 little bags for both my kids and put a coloring book and crayons and some candy, and it was like 5 or 6 things that they could do or color or eat on the way home, because we drove several hours to come home from New Brunswick. She may not have thought that it was a big deal, but it was a big deal to me, and so I'm telling you that she was my favorite aunt. I also believe that she was probably the nicest and strongest in her family. And so when I found out that she had ended it and had planned this for 5 years, it kind of sent my mind astray and whirling, because how could somebody that strong have fallen so far that she couldn't save herself and get out of this situation that she was in and basically snap out of it? That answer I don't think I'll ever know or I'll ever have. I know she was a great human being and a really kind person. So suicide has nothing to do with how the person is or how great they are or that they failed in any way. It is just a means to give up and to end things because you don't think there's any hope for you or any other way, or the loneliness is just too much. There was a couple of times, I didn't hear a lot of rumors about Heather and what was happening. I did hear a couple of things, but you have to understand, I haven't really seen her for a lot of years, and I didn't really understand what was going on or really think about it enough. But I did hear that she was pissing away all of her money, and her siblings would talk, you know, behind her back about how she's pissing away all her money and why is she pissing away all her money and she's not going to have enough money for retirement. Like I said, her husband had died 5 years ago, and something cracked, something snapped inside of her brain. That's what I believe had happened, because she started planning for her suicide shortly after her husband had died. It's almost like they had talked about it and discussed it too, that if he went, that she was going to join him and vice versa. Although their children, which they had a few, obviously had no idea that this was part of their plans and that they were that close. I think there's something to be said for getting too close to your spouse. I think that it's okay to really be madly in love with your loved one, but at the same time, you have to be able to be independent yourself to a certain degree. What I mean by that is, if you fall too much in love with them and you don't have a life of your own aside from your husband, you'll have nowhere to fall if anything happens to either one of you. So I think it's important to keep your distance like that, so that if and when something like that does happen, because it will, one of you will go before the other, you have to be able to have something to fall back on, routine-wise, your own independence, whatever. I definitely lack that. I don't know how to take care of myself. I don't know how to pay bills. I don't really cook anymore. There's a lot of things that I simply can't do because my husband's done everything, which I think is going to hurt me in the long run. But anyway, Heather did that. She did everything for her husband. She was madly in love with him. And she went into this deep loneliness and depression that when somebody snaps, they act perfectly normal around you, basically. But when people say that they didn't or they don't do anything to reach out for help, they do, actually. And she did several things to give them a clue that something was happening. One, she never hid the fact that she was spending all her money, and whenever they'd go on trips, she would spend money excessively. They knew that. All the siblings knew that. Everybody in the family knew that, and they almost laughed about it instead of helping her. Alcohol. She would drink alcohol, a lot of wine. She made her own wine and would drink it excessively, and they knew that she was drunk all the time. They knew that she had checked out for, the good 5 years that whole time. They knew that she had checked out a lot and that she would drink excessively and that she wasn't really showing interest in the normal things that she normally did. Yes, she still hung around her kids, but I think they were adults at this point, and so they didn't really need her very much, and they were probably, living their own lives, and that's not their fault that they were doing that. This is what a mother wants. They want their children to grow up and live their own lives. So I don't blame the children at all here either as far as that goes. You can't really blame anybody for this. But she did that as well. That's the second red flag, is when you see your loved one or family member drinking excessively for no reason really, or it's just completely opposite of their character. When their house becomes really messy or something, for and they stop caring about cleaning their house, or the opposite effect when they clean everything up too much, that's also a clue that something's very wrong and that you need to get them help immediately. So alcohol was with Heather, my Aunt Heather, and she drank daily. She was drunk all the time. She started isolating herself from the family, so they would go to see her sisters, and they would talk about her and say, well, she's drinking the wine, and they would almost laugh about it, thinking that, oh, this is nothing serious, nothing to worry about, and they knew it was completely out of her character, and they did nothing about it. They were so busy with their own lives that they couldn't take time out to realize that something was seriously wrong, way long before it got to the point where she was getting close to committing suicide. Okay. She did that for 5 years as well. She spent all of her money. She didn't hide that either. That's another red flag, is when they start planning and spending their own money, or she started giving away. She gave away her car. She started giving away things to her children and family members. That's a huge one. That means that she's not planning to be around when she's spending all of her money frivolously and giving away her expensive things and not caring. That means that she has a plan. We may not know what that plan is, but there's a plan that she's not wanting to be around. Okay? She was doing that as well near the end, the last couple of years before she committed suicide, before that day. Apparently she had written all her suicide notes to everybody, very detailed, like even her own pets, that she wanted them put down after she was found, which I think, that's just mean. Like, that's all her children would have, is those puppies, but I guess she believed that they weren't going to be taken care of properly, that her kids had enough animals, or their lives were too busy, or somehow her pets would be neglected or whatever. But what I don't understand is how she could, after they were already going through the loss of their mother and their sibling, that she would ask them to do something like that. If it was that important to her, I don't know why she wouldn't have put the dogs down herself, because she didn't have it in her heart to do it. That's why. That's obviously why she didn't do that. She wanted someone else to do that dirty work for her. I thought that was kind of cruel. She put it in her will, so that way they had to do it. They had to honor that request, so she planned all of that. She had her will all done up. She had all her suicide notes all done. She knew where to leave them. She cleaned up her house that night, the last day of 2018, and I think that, not that I'm blaming anybody for the death of my Aunt Heather. I mean, I could even be held responsible for that, for allowing this to happen, even though she was in another province and I only met her a couple of times in 29 years. That's really no excuse either. However, I did hear about these excessive things, and you never want to think in your mind that somebody's going to do something like this. That was her cry for help. All of these things that she was doing, she did it very blatantly. They all knew that this was happening. These are signs of suicide. Okay. So, if I can help anybody out there to, to help prevent this from happening from one of your loved ones, then Aunt Heather's life will not be, her death will not be in vain. Sometimes you have to be a martyr, I guess, in order for people to get that wake-up call. And I know she loved her children dearly, and she had grandchildren, and I know that she spent a lot of time with them, and she loved them very much too. You have to understand that mental illness is a very dangerous thing when it gets to that place, and I don't believe she could have stopped herself. If someone else didn't stop her, handcuff her, and send her in with authorities to go to the mental hospital to get medication, proper medication, to get her to snap out of this. She could not have saved herself. You cannot save yourself when you're at that point. You need to understand this. This is an illness. This isn't something to think that they can just, you know, just decide at the end, like, oh, I'm not going to do this. It's much more complicated than that. Obviously, Aunt Heather was beyond. She was in such a dark place. She had said in her suicide notes that she was very lonely and that she couldn't handle the quiet or the loneliness. You can't leave stuff, memorabilia from the person that passes away. You have to, a lot of times, you'd have to move and go to a new place, get a new apartment or a new house or a new address. You have to get rid of all the things that remind you of that person, you know, because if you're constantly thinking about that and their death or, you know, those things, it's hard for you to come out of a depression. So you have to get rid of that stuff almost immediately. And I've learned that as well from, I believe, the Dr. Phil show. Very serious. There's always red flags. There's always clues. They always leave you clues. There's no way they can do this without you knowing that something is wrong. When they stop talking, when they stop caring, when they start giving things away. I've given you all of these clues. Heather did all of these things, and her siblings were so busy with their lives and talking about her behind her back that they never called the police on her to send her into the hospital so she can get help. I do believe that she was on some mental illness medications, but it probably wasn't the right stuff. I do believe she did seek help in the beginning, probably shortly after her husband had passed away, and they were probably the wrong medications, or they affected her in a way. Sometimes medications can make you worse and not better. And if she didn't reach out for help and nobody noticed, and her husband wasn't there to watch her constantly, then it's easy to fall. I know, because I've been on the wrong medications where I didn't even realize that I didn't want to talk anymore. I didn't want to do anything or care about anything anymore. You fall deep into that place, and you can't pull yourself out of your own ass. So, you know, sometimes you need a swift kick in the ass, and if nobody's there to give you that swift kick in the ass, you can become lost forever, and it's over. Okay? So that's what I wanted to talk to you about. It's very serious, and I want people to understand that with this video, this is how I'm going to honor my Aunt Heather, is by doing this, so other people will know what to look for, and that they can maybe pull themselves out of their own lives, you know, when things like this happen, and keep a closer eye on their loved ones. You don't have to be a therapist to know how to do that. And it's love when you get help for them and you send them away to give them help at a hospital. It doesn't mean that anything bad. It's a good thing, right? It means you care. Now, I don't know if she could have been saved. I don't know. I'll never know that answer. I don't know if she would have kept trying anyway. That's something that I cannot answer. What I know is that talking about somebody and not actually doing something, you know, that's two different things there. And I think they could have done more than they did. So, to my Aunt Heather, rest in peace. There's another thing I wanted to talk to you about, and I asked myself, tonight I was going through an episode of, I guess you call them flashbacks, I don't know what you'd call it, it's this, but really I think what it is the negative voices were talking to me when I came out of the shower tonight, telling me, you're not better, you're not well, you need to go to the hospital, you do want to die. All of these negative thoughts were going on in my head. You can't make it through this. Your family crisis, you're worse off than you think you are. You need to let somebody know this. And I was able to snap myself out of it after 10-15 minutes later, because I had told myself no matter what that I would negate and not listen to anything negative going on in my head. And so that's what I've done, and so I seem to have stabilized myself. But I wanted to make this video to say to myself, what would Erica say? My occupational therapist, what would she say? And I know that she would say to me, go back to the basics, Julie, go back to the basics. That means bathing yourself, making sure you eat, getting lots of rest, and staying hydrated. Very important things. And when you feel like you can't do anything else, whether it's for an hour, a day, a week, a month, or a year, or the rest of your life, always stick to the basics and know that you'll get through it and that things always change. They never stay the same. And you always have to ask for help, and you always have to talk to somebody, and you must never stay silent, okay? And then I started thinking about what my psychotherapist would say to me, as I had her for quite a few years as well. And that would always tell me, breathe. You need to breathe. Alright, I'm going to end this video because it's getting noisy.